in the Gambia, and she's here to discuss on, of course, the role of young people in the Gambia and the work of the UN. The next panelist will be Mr. Lamin Dabo. Lamin, would you say hi? Your video also appears frozen now. Lamin. Lamin, you are muted, Lamin.
Hello, Kule.
Excellent.
Thank you for having me. I'm very glad to be part of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you. And then the final panelist would be Ms. Jama Jack, who, as everyone knows, is extremely active youth and women advocates. Anytime I want to be energized on women issues, I just go to Jama's Twitter handle, especially on Sunday mornings, to hear a lot on, as she continues to keep us aware and never to forget the woman and especially the young woman in the Gambia. Jama, welcome to this session and this series.
Thank you, Kunle. It's a pleasure to be here.
Very well. Is Seraphine back?
I'm back, but my video is not working. I'm going to move to another computer, please.
Excellent. We'll just hold on for that.
And they only linger in town. My greetings.
I on mute, sorry. I hope there's no dirty things in my back.
Okay, Seraphine, now we see you. I was just a quick introduction of the panelists. I wanted to start with you, but our assistant said we should start with the young people. I guess that's why we didn't see you. So maybe I made a mistake starting with the young people. So again, let me welcome the UN Resident Coordinator, Seraphine Wakana, who will speak to us on, who is a panelist on this first, like I said, first episode of our series on youth, the impact of COVID-19 on young people. Seraphine, welcome.
Thank you, Kunle, and thanks for inviting me to this call. I'm happy to sit and talk to the young people. I start by presenting myself. I joined the Gambia late in 2018 as United Nations Resident Coordinator. And I'm happy to be here. I don't know if I should go and start chatting or if just introduce myself.
No, the introduction is fine. I will bring you in. I'll bring you in.
Thanks.
Okay, so now we have people, our panelists. Let me welcome you once again. We have young and old Gambians connected to us on Zoom, almost 50 people at this time, but we're also broadcasting live on Facebook where we have more people here to listen to us. Again, just to repeat for people just joining across all the broadcast platform, welcome to the first of the COVID-19 series on young people and the impact of COVID-19 on young people. We do hope that this series, which will be focusing on different issues that affect young people today, will be speaking generally on the impact. But as we go on in the next week is a weekly seminar, and then we'll be discussing different thematics like education, where specialists will come speak to education and young people. As you know, schools are closed, and employment, empowerment, health, peace and development, and also other series as we continue to come up. But now we will start with Seraphine, the UN Resident Coordinator, who will quickly help us to piece together the implication of COVID-19 of young people from the angle of UN, a major development partner of the Gambia. Seraphine, I would just ask, Seraphine, as young people constitute about 60% of the population of the Gambia, can you please provide for us your general view of what you have seen since the last 3 months of COVID-19 in the Gambia and on the impact of COVID-19 on young people as you see a major thematic of your work and the areas where you believe that the UN is working and will continue to work with young people in COVID-19? Over to you, Seraphine. You have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and apology again for the disruption on the technology. And maybe that's why we also need the young people to come in on the technology issue. So coming back to your question, I think you highlighted some of the issues. You pointed out already that the young people in the Gambia are about 60% of the population. And for me, it's already telling us more on why this group is important and why we should have strategic activities really targeting the youth. So at the UN, and again, saying that we were already focusing on the youth even before the COVID-19. So the youth is a key targeted group for the UN. We all know that when we are a people-centered organization, and you know that this group is representing 60%, you cannot do anything without focusing on this group. And the other question is on the COVID. We all know that COVID had an impact on all cross-cutting issues. We know that it's first a health-related outbreak, but it also has an impact on socio-economic. It impacts on communities, impacts on families, impacts on social cohesion. So the response that the UN is implementing is a holistic approach, and on our basic principle of leaving no one behind. So the first thing was to look at those who are mostly affected. And the youth is one key group of those who are affected. And if you look at the age of this group, you understand that the sectors will be, the strategy will be multidimensional. We look at the group at school, so education will come in. We look at health. We see everything related to job creation, and particularly those who lost their jobs because of the COVID. We also know that some of this group are already entrepreneurs, so the business have been affected. Those are the domains that we are addressing. And for us, we have, again, thanks to Kunle for leading the UN working group on youth, which is comprising all the agencies and really defining the way we address the issue of the youth. The other thing I wanted to highlight is, for us, youth is not beneficiaries, but they are partners. So we want to design solutions that we make together. So we use a participatory approach. And I think this call today is also part of this process. And I wanted to recall for the UN this year, 2020, if it was not the COVID, we have already launched the Decade of Action process, which is meant to hear from all the different stakeholders what they think should be done for the countries to reach the 2030 agenda. So I will be happy to hear from youth, the youth in the Gambia, to really help the UN address the key issues that the young people are facing. We have done a lot of assessments. We have our ideas on the impact of COVID on this group, but to have a clear understanding, I think the ideas should come from you. So my introduction here is to say that The youth is a key group for us. We are ready to support. We have started. We are, as the UN, and based on our comparative advantage, building capacity is our key element. So we are ready to build capacity for the youth, to be able to take decisions, to contribute to the political processes. This is another angle where we need to see the youth active. But we also want them to go down to the communities and advocate for social cohesion, but also to really raise awareness of everybody, of every Gambian, to be able to respond first to the COVID response, because I'm coming back to say the COVID is multidimensional, but health comes first, and then we look at the impact. But there are some of the domains where the health will not succeed if we don't look at them carefully, including to really make sure that when we are implementing the COVID response, we also think about those who are mostly affected. So I will stop here maybe, and if there is any question, I will be ready to address it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Seraphine, Madam Resident Coordinator, for giving us that introductory expose on the role of young people in COVID-19 and how the UN focuses on young people. I'm very happy that you were able to speak on issues that were probably not addressed. We know that health is first. We know about the socioeconomic issues. We know that a lot of jobs have been lost in our tourism sector, for example, where young people really participate. We know about agriculture. We understand the implication on school. But I'm also happy that you spoke about our often neglected area of peace, which is very important, in ensuring that peace continues to reign in the Gambia and for our people. We'll come back to you definitely. There'll be questions, but thank you for that. I'll quickly move over to the chief servant of young people in the Gambia, as I would like to call. I'll move to, I would have called him boss, but he says he's a servant. So I'll call him chief servant of young people in the Gambia. Mr. Lamin Dabo, very erudite, very articulate. But just to tell us, I know, but I would like to encourage you, Lamin, please don't take more than 10 minutes of our time, because if we let you, you will not stop. So we're timing you, and we'll mute your mic when it's time. Lamin, please, could you please specifically again, in a general term, tell us the impact of COVID-19 on young people? But as you do that, please help us arrive at what young people are already doing to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on themselves and on the population. I know Seraphine spoke about young people already doing community engagement. We see it. Please let us see. So we don't want to see young people as only beneficiaries or victims, but participants in this process. Lamin, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kule. Maybe from here, Jama will send the bill to you. Of course, she's my barrister. She's not only our communication expert, but if anyone tries me, Jama actually deals with you. So the only linger in town will take care of that. Thank you once again for this opportunity. And I want to use this opportunity again to appreciate the efforts of UNFPA and the entire UN system for the support to young people and to the government of the Gambia. This is quite timely, talking about young people and COVID-19. But first, before I answer your question, I would love you to allow me to acknowledge and appreciate the efforts of the various young people, youth organizations in their thousands, in the healthcare sector, in the military, in the police, of course, the activists, the young youth organizations that are at the front line, sacrificing their lives, trying to make a difference, trying to protect this country, and of course, trying to ensure that their families are safe, and all of us are safe in this country. So I want to acknowledge and I want to appreciate their sacrifice and contributions towards the fight against COVID-19. Away from that, since the confirmation, not even before the confirmation of the first case in the Gambia, when the COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic, I would say the first initial responders in this country were young people. They did not only took up social media to raise awareness, but they took it upon themselves to go from house to house, from compound to compound, educating their peers and ensuring that they bring the issue of COVID-19 to the fore so that duty bearers can give COVID-19 the due attention it deserves. This was not just an advocacy role they played, but I think it was also a moral obligation, a responsibility young people has fulfilled that, as Sarafina has rightly mentioned, that they don't see themselves as beneficiaries, but they see themselves as critical stakeholders in the fight against COVID-19. And again, we want to appreciate all those young men and women who, in one way or the other, has taken responsibility, has practiced safe, and had pushed beyond their limits to ensure that duty bearers are reminded about the importance and the gravity of COVID-19, and also to remind their peers as to how they should protect themselves and prevent the spread or break the chain of transmission of COVID-19 in the Gambia. When we talk about the impact of COVID-19 on young people, we need to look at different areas. Often we will say 60% of our population are young people. According to the Level 4 survey 2018, youth 15 to 35 is about 68.2% of our population. 68.2% of our population is not just half. We could say this is almost 3/4 of our population. These are the people who are supposed to be at the forefront of our socioeconomic transformation. These are the people who are working in our health sector. These are the people who are in uniform, both the military, the police. These are the people who are in our markets, working on their feet, working from day and night in the shops, in the stalls. These are the people who are serving as teachers for us. These are the people working in most of the public offices. But again, we don't need to forget, these are also the taxi drivers. They are, of course, the hotel workers, and they are also passengers in those vehicles and also students in different schools, including universities. So when we talk about the impact of COVID-19, we would say that proportionately it has affected young people, impacted on young people more than any constituency. And when we talk about young people, we are talking about young men and women. And I think that's important not only for our understanding and response, but also we need to acknowledge this for our recovery and post-COVID activities. For example, let's look at the school or education system. In the education system, COVID-19 has caused a serious disruption, not only in the learning, but you will agree with me that this disruption will affect the curriculum delivery, has already affected that, I would say, despite the affirmative action that has been introduced by Ministry of Education, which is well appreciated. However, the impact on the education system will have far-reaching implications, not only for the terminal students at the grade 9 and grade 12, but of course, students who are supposed to transit from one grade system to the next grade system. It's also, because it has affected our education system, it has a potential to delay those who are supposed to transit. And it also has an impact on the quality of education that is being delivered to the students. We have adjusted to, most of the schools have adjusted to online education for the first time, without a pretest, mostly, and we had to use it as a new normal. We did not understand the dynamics at some point, and where we even understand the dynamics, we did not put in place measures to mitigate the impact of shifting from physical education face-to-face to digital or online education. So this has a very big impact, huge impact on quality for now. But away from that, When you look at the transiting or the secondary school students, potentially we know this can affect their performance in exams, which is here, let me say, the tool that we use to measure the performance of students when they fail exams or when they pass exams. And when they fail exams, it definitely serves as a deterrent for progression. But of course, those who are supposed to leave grade 12 and they need to go and get university admissions in the Gambia or outside, how do we explain their scenario, their situation? But if they're supposed to also go and look for a job, how did they get a job when they did not perform in their exams? Because they did not have quality learning time, learning hours due to COVID-19. So it has both short-term but also long-term effect, not only on the education system, but the students that are learning, and which majority of whom are young people. But again, still on the education system, we have training institutions. Before COVID-19, most of the training institutions we are running at full scale, training young people in different skill areas. But due to COVID-19, they had to call off most of their sessions because the system was not prepared to transit these young people, these students, who are supposed to be our labor force, to move from physical classroom learning to online education. So this impact on education will have multiple effects on different sectors of economy, from not just education, but up to the economy and also our social settings. Let's go to the economy. You'll understand that 41.5% of our population, our young people, are unemployed. With COVID-19, it is estimated that over 500,000 jobs are lost in this country. Out of this 500,000 jobs that have been lost, majority, I would say, over 60% are definitely young people. If you look at the tourism and hospitality industry, those who are in unstable jobs are mostly young people. Those who are in contractual jobs are mostly young people. They are not the top executives. These are people who sometimes work on contractual basis. These are people who go for daily works, daily pay, and these are people who have short-term contracts. So when it comes to layoff, they become more vulnerable, and they're the ones who are mostly being laid off. And you must also say that there are a lot of startups that we are picking up before pre-COVID-19. These startups, because of the lockdown, because of the public emergency regulations, they had to shut their businesses down and go home. And during this period, they had to depend on their little profits that they gathered over time to keep themselves and keep their families, especially if they are vulnerable young female entrepreneurs. This is a direct impact that affects their businesses, and they will have to take another time, another struggle, another cycle to be able to regenerate and become the entrepreneurs or the enterprises we know them before COVID-19. But again, we must look at with the economic impact goes beyond just the entrepreneurs that do buy and sell. The regulations of the public emergency had called for downsizing of passengers in the vehicles. And these public transports, these are young people who are also providing, some are breadwinners and providing for their families. It has contributed a loss of revenue. It also has contributed to some of them even losing their jobs because they could not provide for the business owners the necessary revenue that they anticipated. And it contributed to job loss there, but it equally contributed to dissatisfaction, stress, and of course, contribute to some internal conflicts between them and the vehicle owners. But again, the economic part also look at internet connectivity. It has been quite, let me say, expensive. We appreciate the contribution of, let's say, GSM companies to create COVID-19 bundles or so. But even with that, the demand has increased and the quality has been compromised to a great extent. And this, we will say, contribute to also business loss. When you go to the health sectors, we will say COVID-19 has exposed our healthcare system. It has exposed us to a level that all of us, even ordinary people, who actually predominantly say we are the best, to understand that we have a lot of work to do. There's a lot more room for improvement. Because when COVID-19 came, the preparedness was not at its best. We are able to focus and focus on COVID-19, but other health services had to suffer at some point. And I must say, it did not only affect these healthcare services, but it also affects different areas of our lives as young people, especially youth organizations who actually depend on grants, donor funding, or even contributions to do their activities. But due to COVID-19, those things cannot progress. But for now, I want to stop here, understanding that we will have to discuss other details. But I will say that COVID-19 has affected young people more than any other sector or any other constituency. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lamin, for taking us to school on that issue. Like I warned myself, and thank you. I was just about to come in, but when we return, Lamin, we would. I'm already seeing questions on board. We would like you to also. We hope we'll have an opportunity for you to give us concrete suggestions on what you think should be done for young people, and also a little bit on what the role that young people are already playing in the response. But thank you, Lamin, for those initial issues. You've told us that young people were the initial responders. I got some statistics from you that are mind-blowing and mind-boggling on the fact that even if we left every other sector and just addressed young people, we'll be doing right. So thank you very much for that. I'm gonna have to go now to Jama Jack, who, like I said, is going to put some light on specific issues and a group, the most important group in our system that was often remain invisible in our conversation and issues we do. Jama is a feminist, and I'm happy to have her on board to speak about the impact of COVID-19 on young women, especially. Jama, please help us to try to understand and shed more light on the impact of COVID-19 on young women, especially on their health and well-being, and also if you have some time to go to other areas of how COVID-19 is affecting young women in the Gambia and what might be some mitigating measures to these adverse effects, if any. Thank you very much, Jama. Over to you.
Thank you, Kunle. So I will just start by also acknowledging what Lamin has said, that young people have been at the forefront of the COVID-19 response in the Gambia. I want to recognize that and thank everyone who has been doing work in all of the different sectors. But in addition to the work that is being done to support the national response, there is also a huge impact on our lives and our livelihoods. And I say our because I am one of them. Now, my intervention is going to focus on the health and well-being of young women coming from a sexual and reproductive health and rights perspective. So I'm just gonna go right in. When we look at the health impacts, for example, when the initial communication on COVID-19 started and the messages were being developed, there was a very heavy focus on the specific vulnerabilities of older persons, leading to a potential lax attitude among young people who believed that perhaps they were not at risk or that they would always survive the virus. Now, what we have seen, especially in the Gambia, is that right from our very first case, this myth was debunked. Our first case was a 28-year-old young woman. To date, we have 28 cases, and 15 of these are people aged 35 and below, and 6 of these 15 are women. So COVID-19 is real for all of us, but there's that increased vulnerability that comes from messaging that started from the beginning to say the biggest group of vulnerable people are older people. I think one of the recommendations, so I'll just be doing the points and the recommendations as I go, is that we need to revisit the messaging. We need to go back to the concepts that we were sharing, the facts that we were sharing, and have people understand that there is no discrimination when it comes to the infection patterns of COVID-19. Now, there have been projections right from the start of the pandemic on the issue of women losing access to health services and social support. And one of these groups, and this is valid for all groups of women, including young women, one of the groups that particularly stand out is pregnant women as a vulnerable group because they're in need of antenatal care. But you now find a situation where you're living in a pandemic situation and they're unsure of whether they can go to the hospital to receive this care because of lockdowns in certain countries. In Gambia, we can't really talk about a lockdown, but there were certain restrictions. But also because of downscaling of services in some of the health posts, which now leaves them in a situation where they do not know if the services are available. And even if they do know that the services are available, they may not have means to access the health facilities where they can get these services. And this is basically done in reference to what happened in countries like Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone during the Ebola epidemic, where they saw a huge surge in maternal mortality ratios because women stayed away from the health facilities because of the quarantine restrictions, but also because of the misconceptions they had on virus transmission. Some of them were afraid to go to the hospitals because they thought they would get the COVID or the Ebola virus at the time, COVID now. So this is basically what we are seeing being replayed in our context and in so many different countries. At the start of the pandemic, I work at the MRC. What we noticed was that in that first week after the first case, especially knowing that she was isolated here, our clinical services turnout dropped. And this was also replicated in other health facilities across the country. And that is something to take note of because women are really the most vulnerable when it comes to access to health care. Now, this has affected also vaccination programs, and this would have longer term implications on health where we could see ourselves going beyond the COVID pandemic, but now having to deal with other illnesses that we had already registered some progress on because services are not available or easily accessible to the people who need them. Now, coming on to the sexual and reproductive health and rights of young people, when we talk about barriers, I think we need to ask ourselves whether these barriers are new at all. And for me, I would say no. In a country like the Gambia, the barriers have always existed. What COVID-19 has done is just pronounce these barriers. Now we're seeing exacerbated disparities when it comes to how young people access SRHR services and products. And that is really where the conversation needs to happen. We talk about, oh, COVID-19 should end and we should go back to normal. I think what we should be thinking about is what kind of normal are we going back to? How about create a new normal where SRHR services are easily accessible, they're affordable, and they really fit the context where we find ourselves. The pandemic is exposing our unmet need for SRHR services and products. And I think that is really what lesson we can take out of this experience and try to do better. Now, in hospitals, when preparations were being made for response to COVID-19, what we saw was that there was a downscaling of other services, including SRHR services. I'll give the example of the case we had to support a young woman that reached out to Think Young Women to say she needed to access a gynecologist. She went to the hospital, which is a public hospital, because that's what she could afford. And she was told the service is not available. It brings to question the disparities we have. If it is somebody who is well-placed and privileged enough to be able to go to a private hospital to get this service, that's okay. But we're talking about the majority of Gambian women who may not have access to these resources, who may not have the financial means to seek private care, now having to sit and wait for a pandemic to end before they can access their sexual and reproductive health services. Now, because of these limitations, what we are going to see is a possible higher risk of unplanned pregnancies and the related complications that come with that. We look at unsafe abortions as well, especially in a context where abortion is restricted in the Gambia, thanks to our legislation, and also an increase in STIs, because where do you go to get reproductive health products? Where do you go to get contraceptives, for example? Where do you go to get protection products, such as condoms, for example? And when I speak of condoms and contraceptives and all of these SRH products, we also think about what the impact has had on adolescent and youth-friendly spaces. First, we did not really have all of this when it comes to sexual and reproductive health and rights. But now there's an even limited space. What has happened is the different organizations that have been creating this space for adolescents and young people are now having to close their businesses, are having to close their spaces because of the fear of transmission of COVID-19. The example I would give again is our mentorship program at Think Young Women, which is supported by UNFPA, which we have had to stop in a way because we do not have the resources to be able to take it virtual, because that means providing devices and data and all of that to the girls. But we're now also missing out on that physical space that we have been able to create to provide comprehensive sexuality education for the girls that need it. So there are so many barriers to access to sexual and reproductive rights that we need to think of. Now we talk about also gender-based violence, and I'll just do this briefly and try to wrap up. There has been reports of increased cases of GBV, especially physical and sexual violence against women because of the lockdowns. At the start of the pandemic, there were so many news reports about how the lockdowns are leading to a lot of divorce. And a lot of people laughed and we thought, oh, people don't like, people are marrying other people that they do not like. And I think that took away from the real conversation that we should be having. It's a conversation of violence. It's a conversation of an acceptance of the normalization of violence. It's a conversation of how we all just laugh and move on to the next thing. Now, because of the lockdowns, and of course, Lamin has spoken about the impact on people's livelihoods and how this now transfers to stress in the homes, we see a lot of cases of physical violence. And because in the Gambia, there's really not enough structures. Can we even talk about a structure? That's a question we ask as well. There are not enough structures to provide adequate response and support to some of the victims of gender-based violence. And there's also a lack of data. And this is one of the things that is creating challenges with regards to providing the services. If we do not have the data, if we do not have the figures, if we do not have a clear idea of where these cases are happening, it will be very difficult to respond effectively to them. Now, what we need is a targeted response. We need data. We need to be able to know that this is happening. We need to be able to know where we go to find the women and girls who are at risk or who are already experiencing violence and provide the support that they need, that is tailored to their needs, that is tailored to their context. That's the recommendation I will make on this. You move away from that as well, because people are staying at home. I'll touch briefly on education as one of the impacts on young women as well. What we have seen is an effort from the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education to provide a sort of continuity of education services in the country. But one of the missing elements of that conversation is who is benefiting from this virtual learning. Now we are all at home. We live in homes where girls do the chores, boys do whatever they want. They can do whatever they want with their free time. When these lessons are going on radio and on TV, what are the girls doing? In our homes, are we creating a space for them to follow these lessons, or because they are home, are we still putting that expectation on them to carry out the domestic chores in our homes? We also talk about the limited privileges. So yes, the services available on radio and TV, but how many people are able to connect really? We look at the disparities that exist, and we will realize that a lot of girls might be missing out on these lessons, which means that for the past 3 months, they may have lost out on a lot of instructional hours and missed out a lot on the curriculum as much as it's being covered. Now, this also has an impact. How many of them are likely to return to school after this lockdown? Some of them are now being forced into child marriages. Some of them are at risk of FGM because they're staying at home and they can easily be hidden when these practices are done on them or when these acts are done on them. So those are some of the things we need to think about. There's a really huge equity question when it comes to how we're delivering services to different people in different sections of society. And then I would just share maybe a few recommendations. I think one of the first ones I would say is that the Gambia state
Jama,
has a
can you hold on to the recommendations? I'll come back to you.
Okay, that's fine. So I'll just stop here.
Just stop here. Okay, excellent. Initially you said you were going to do the recommendations, so I was waiting for it, but let's put it together so that our audience can follow us. Jama, thank you for the passionate way, like you always do, to focus the attention on issues around women, especially young women, in COVID-19. You spoke around, I'll start from the last, gender-based violence. As we know, countries that collect data, many countries have noticed that 25% at least increase in incidences of gender-based violence, globally. And then we also have issues around access to reproductive care. Like you said, many women are not attending health services or picking them up because of COVID-19. One recommendation which you have brought is that we need to refocus our message. I picked that to target young people and also make services available. Thank you very much to the three panelists who have Seraphine, Lamin, and Jama, who have addressed, the issues of COVID-19 and young people. I have questions. I'm going to go quickly to the question board and have some responses. Okay, let me start with Lamin, then I'll go to Seraphine. Lamin, the question here for you is, how can we enhance partnerships at different levels to have an effective youth and community engagement to respond to the impact of COVID-19? I can repeat that question. How can we enhance partnerships to ensure an effective community level response to COVID-19 for young people? Lamin, if you understand that question, I'll give it to you to quickly. Please, you have 2 minutes to do that, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kule. I won't take more than 2 minutes. By the way, I would say young people are natural partners to all stakeholders in the fight against COVID-19. We just need to ensure that this partnership is structured, and we need to ensure that this partnership is mutually benefiting, and that the role of young people are recognized and respected. When there is a case in each community, the people who usually report these cases are young people. They are the ones who have mobile phones, and they are the ones who can call 1025, and they are doing that at will already. It's a natural role. But we need to find a way, how do we structure this? Also, the border communities. It's the young people who are serving as vigilantes to report cases, who are even ensuring that people don't come into our country where there are no security, for example, who are doing surveillance work. So we need to formalize this. I remember we had discussions with UNFPA and Ministry of Health, possibly to also have formalized and structured this where we'll have community youth volunteers. When community young people will be in their communities, but they'll be remunerated. They will be incentivized to stay in their community to provide service that they are already providing in this COVID. This will be serving as an incentive to continue the great work they are doing, but they also fulfill their citizenship responsibility by ensuring that our borders are secured, our community cases are reported, and that we all contribute towards the fight against COVID-19. And it could be both at strategic level, where decisions have been made. We need to make sure young people are in those decision-making table. We cannot continue to make decisions on their behalf when we know over 68.2% of the population are this constituency. But beyond that, even at regional level, we need to have our young people sitting at the table where decisions have been made. And of course, also coordinate with our youth organizations, several youth organizations who are volunteering their time and energy to educate our communities about the dangers of COVID-19, but they are also triggering behavioral change. So we need to use this. For example, National Youth Council have over 182 registered youth organizations, both at national and regional level. This is a social capital. This is an asset we could utilize. These are people who are volunteering their time. How do we ensure that these numbers are utilized for the good of our communities and for the program? But again, like Jama said, one key word that we need to take note of, Kule, young people are not only taking action as partners, but we are majority of those who are affected or infected among the cases. So we need to be on board so that we can take responsibility and prevent further spread of COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lamin.
We can't hear you, Kunle.
Kule, you are mute. Can you unmute your mic, Kule?
Okay, thank you very much. So the next question is for Seraphine. So Seraphine, someone from our audience, from our esteemed audience, wants to know what mechanisms have the UN put in place to support the government in the mobilization of resources, technical and financial, to respond to COVID-19, especially as it affects young people. I can repeat, Seraphine, if you want me to. Do I repeat?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, thank you. Over to you, Seraphine. I know you got it. Take care.
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe before I respond to your question, I just wanted to compliment on what the National Youth Council was saying on partnership, and saying that this partnership is what we do to implement our project. But I would also like to hear from the participants what they think about what we do in partnering with them, so that we can do it better. So I know that we are working with the National Youth Council. We are working with different youth networks to implement most of our projects at community level. We also do it at national level, at all levels. So if we can have also ideas from this audience, it will be good for the UN to improve the way we do things. So coming back to resource mobilization, I think the UN has been really supporting the government since the beginning of the crisis. And even before, I think we were the first to provide resources, particularly the human resources, to help the government first to draft the COVID response. So because you need also, when you need to you mobilize resources, you need to be clear on what you need and how you are going to use the money that you are requesting. So that was first our support to help the government strengthen their strategy, their COVID-19 response. And we are still supporting the coordination of the response at the implementation level. So for the UN, I think the first key area on resource mobilization is to draft the documents, but also to advocate to all donors. And here I can say that many traditional donors and even new ones have been supporting the government financially, but also technically. So you know that the EU, the World Bank, the IMF, those key traditional donors, the African Development Bank, the Islamic Development Bank, have provided their support to the Gambia, and we are grateful to the effort that are being done based on the assessments, based on the needs that have been highlighted through the support of the UN. I think you also know that other partners, including the private sector, the civil society, the philanthropists, everyone in his capacity has tried to support the government. And for us, we are really thankful to all those who are providing support. We are still working with the government to highlight the gaps, because sometimes, you know, you may find the response being funded and still have some gaps. And that's where we are trying to continue to help the government to flag on the gaps. And recently, the initiative of having a national COVID-19 coordinator is an important decision from the government that will help the government to really embrace all the sectors. At the beginning, we all know that we were rushing to address the health issues, but we ended up noticing that we need to broaden the response. And that's why the national COVID-19 coordinator is trying to support the government. And we are also supporting that unit to see him really focusing on all the sectors, including what we are highlighting here, the youth, the women, and all the vulnerable groups. We know that they are many, they were many before, and the numbers are growing with the COVID-19. So for us, we really make sure that vulnerable groups are considered, are covered, and we are ready to support the government to mobilize more resources if we feel there are gaps. For the UN, well, I would say that we are really focusing on the youth, and we are drafting some of the projects focusing on COVID-19, but also on how do we build peace with the youth. So those are the initiatives that we are taking. we know that we are a partner among others. So this role is not only for the UN, we do it in a collaborative manner with other partners, and we are happy to see that the partners are really responding positively to the Gambia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Serafin, for that clear explanation of the partnership. I'm sure my friend who asked the question is much satisfied. And I think the people of the Gambia, including the young people, understand, like Lamin has also rightly said, the partnership that the UN has built as a trusted partner for the government and the people of the Gambia. You elucidated on the way even the COVID-19 response plan and also mobilizing resources, technical and financial, to support the entire system. You indeed touched on the different areas, and you wanted to know, what the young people feel. So it's important that to just quickly say that because time is limited, we would not take all questions or all comments, but we really want to hear from you, like Serafin said. So please, if you have comments that we're not taking or any suggestion on partnership, do send us an email to covidseminar.gambia@unfpa.com. The rapporteur team will type that out in the chat box now. But please do send us an email. And if there's any topic you want us to address specifically as the weeks come, please do ensure that you advise us. We will take comments. We'll take what Serafin wants to know on the UN partnership, but also comments on how we can, topics to address and how we can make this series better for all the young people of the Gambia. Quickly, I will go to Jama. Jama, there's a lot of questions for you. Let me apologize that we might go a little over time today as a first time. Oftentimes, these webinars are arranged for 2 hours, 1 hour, 30 minutes, but we thought we could do it in 1 hour. But I will apologize. But Jama, there's a lot of questions for you. I'll try to summarize them and put it in one whole unit. The first says, how do we mobilize the academic and other communities to guide protection, gender-based and SRH protection efforts in a pragmatic way? That means, so don't only think of the academic community, but the entire ecosystem to address gender-based violence and protection during COVID-19 and beyond. Jama, do you get that, Jama?
Yes. So when I saw the question, I had already put down my points. I think the academic community has a very important role to play. One of the things that has come up, I think, for all the different speakers is the lack of adequate data that will support our targeted response and make sure the people who really need services and support are receiving the services and support that they need. And I think this is where that community can come in with research. We need to be able to do research that is specific to our context. I know sometimes when we talk about research, our methodologies, our different questions are sometimes things that we just import from somewhere else. There's currently a very interesting conversation on decolonizing research. And I think that's also what we need to piggyback on and ensure that we have research that is relevant to the Gambia's context, that asks questions that are relevant to Gambian people. And that will help us to be able to now get evidence that will inform policy. And when that is implemented, we would see a change. I think that's one of the gaps that's missing. When it comes to issues of gender-based violence, for example, I think the two main pieces of research that we fall back on are the MIX and the DHS, which are done like every 4 years or every 5 years or every 3 years. And sometimes there are gaps between these periods. I think we need to have a lot more research done on some of these different things that happen to women and get all the partners on the table as well to be able to look at what responses would be adequate, what responses will be appropriate to deal with some of the issues that are coming out from the evidence that we're now getting from the research. I think that's what I would say for the academic community. And this also includes scientific research. I happen to work in a scientific research center right now, and we're seeing in real time what the research we're doing on COVID-19 can do to inform some of the actions that we're taking as part of our contributions to the national response. And so I think with everything else, that's where it starts. Let us do the research. Let's have the data. Let's have the evidence. And that will inform us to take the right action. For everyone else, I think the message on partnership has been very clear. I just want to say again, maybe we also reevaluate these partnerships and see who do these partnerships benefit. It is important that when we talk about partnerships, it is not just skewed towards one section benefiting and another not benefiting. I think partnership is great, yes. Partnership is what we actually need to be able to get solutions. But in that discourse as well, we should think about how we implement these partnerships and how we approach these partnerships. This is what I would say for that question.
Thank you very much, Jama. I would just like to summarize. It's 3 p.m. Indeed, I'm very happy, but also feel a little sad with the level of engagement we are having. Questions are coming. People want to know so many things. I will just read out a few. ED, thanks on behalf of young people. How are we taking the lead? To develop aspect of development, and of course the response crusade. These are general questions. They are things that I think have come up in adding. How do we strengthen our system by working outside the box so we have a responsive system for all? I think these are things we will continue to reflect on. Where can women and girls who are facing any form of violence go for support? That's a particular one. Which is specific. Jama, do you have any point on that one? Just to come back to you on that, if you can answer, if you have any suggestion on that, go ahead, please.
I mean, the system is to report to the police. I think the person who asked the question also notes what implications there are with regards to access to the police stations. And I think in that conversation, we also need to acknowledge that our law enforcement has not been the best, especially when it comes to issues of violence against women or gender-based violence in general. But this is what we would say, report to the police. Otherwise, there's also the Network Against Gender-Based Violence, which is a collective of different organizations working on issues of gender-based violence. They have one-stop centers that they have instituted, which provide all of that support. So medical attention, support for access to justice, psychosocial support. Those are some of the things that are provided. I think these two, I would say, let the police be your first stop, and the Network Against Gender-Based Violence as well. Otherwise, we do like we have been doing. Some of us have inboxes that are always filled with people reaching out for support, and we use our networks to be able to see how we can provide the support that they are looking at. Again, it's just a thought again on how we need to rethink our systems and ensure that the law works for everyone. And when we have the policies, it serves the right purpose.
Thank you very much, Jama. I have one question, and I don't know if Lamin will be able to take this very quickly. I want to try to be fair and equitable as possible. It speaks about the state of public health emergency and the impact on emerging businesses, especially the informal business run by women. How do we facilitate this return? Lamin, if you allow me, if you have any point on that, I can allow you to take it, but also to say that I think next week's session is going to be on employment and particularly focusing, and that might deal. But if you have any point on this, please, if you can just quickly respond to that, if you got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kule. I think I've already alluded to that in my presentation. We need to, and so we support these young startups to adapt, to accelerate, and of course, to also recover. That is essential, because at the moment we have this challenge of COVID-19, so adaptation is necessary, be it digital adaptation, moving to online, or if they need other supports, we need to provide that. But beyond that, we should help them accelerate, because they have lost the momentum, and helping them to accelerate will be helpful to pick up where they have stopped, and to also include them in the recovery plan. We should not only focus on the macro businesses, the bigger businesses in our recovery plan. As UN, as government, or as actors, we need to look at the young startups who are giving what they have, all their best, but due to COVID, they have to lost it all too. So that would be my response.
Thank you very much, Lamin, for that. Thank you, Alpha, for question. Amadou, thank you for your questions. I hope we have tried to respond to that. In quick, let me summarize in the absence of a final word. 3 main issues that have come out today as we address COVID-19 as it affects young people generally around the fact that we need to have build stronger partnerships. Young people must be at the table, young people must work, and the UN resident coordinator greatly alluded to us to that and wanted to know how young people saw or viewed the partnerships that is had with young people. Young people are not a homogeneous group. They are not specific. They must be, ingrained and interacted into all our decision-making processes. One of the recommendations will probably be for the young people youth council to also find a way of being, part of those the national response coordination structure, to address COVID-19, so that it can pick to Jama's points on the fact that messaging can change, speak as they address young people. Again, over 60% of the population. The second thing I would like to say that comes out clear is the fact that COVID-19 has redefined the way we do things. Whether we like it or not, the world might not return to the way we were. So basically, the way we used to organize events, gather together in a crowd of 300, hold meetings together has changed, meaning that we need to think outside the box. That came from a question, but also to optimize technology, as some of the partners, the panelists alluded to, in responding to our issues and dealing with things. Someone asked a question on how do the girls who are out of learning, how do we ensure that we use digital platforms? And I believe the young people can actually work on this, create platforms, create apps, do things that actually help us reach more with less in a safe, and inclusive environment. Technology, we know, is the way. The final thing is about knowledge creation and use. And Jama really, barreled down on that we need to know more on what is happening with young people, specific, so that our programs and interventions can be clear and targeted. Only then can we get the results we desire. Only then can we know what we want to do, and only then can we measure our actions versus the desired results. On that note, let me, kindly, really thank the panelists for coming on board to this first session. Again, like I said, it's general. This decade is a decade of action, as declared by the United Nations Secretary General, to accelerate, the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goal. In the Gambia, we have picked youth and gender under the leadership of the resident coordinator as our focus for this year. That's why we continue to intensify our conversation with young people, our engagement with young people. And if you see the banner behind me, it says Decade of Action. And we were not just mouthing it, we are saying it. The potential that COVID-19 might have slowed global efforts towards achieving the Agenda 2030. We must work together to ensure that we redouble our effort and accelerate so we can achieve the SDGs. On that note, I would invite everybody that is here to the next session next week, which is likely to be on employment, as I said. It's same time, same channels, and we will provide the information. Another interesting conversation by panelists. On that note, let me take 30 seconds from the 3 panelists to say their last word before we close. And after that, I'm going to close the meeting. So starting from Seraphine, 30 seconds, say your last word. Thank you, Seraphine. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Kunle. I just say thanks to those who participated to this call. We are happy at the UN to build strong partnership with the youth. We have started, we want to do more, and the decade of action is for you. So as I mentioned in my talk, I want to hear from the youth. We want to really see how you feel the UN is doing and how we can do better. Thank you.
Lamin. Lamin, 30 seconds.
All right, thank you very much. My last word will be to thank all youth volunteers, youth civil society organizations, young people in healthcare facilities providing service to keep up, that we recognize them, we appreciate them, we love them, that this is the country we have, we all give our best to save this country. But again, to all duty bearers, just to tell you, the youth constituency is too large to be ignored and too important to be forgotten. This is our challenge, and collectively we can definitely make this country better and greater during COVID and after COVID. Thank you very much.
Jama, your final words.
So I was speaking on SRHR, the sexual and reproductive health and rights. And I think there's a group that's very much marginalized, especially here in the Gambia. That's the LGBTQ plus groups. It is June, this is Pride Month. My final message is just a message of solidarity and love to queer Gambians, especially queer young Gambians who are struggling with their identities, who are struggling to be accepted in a society that has decided to define what is right for them and what is not. It's love and solidarity for me, and hopefully we can all do better to ensure your rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all that joined us. Once again, on behalf of the UN in the Gambia, I say thank you to our panelists. I say thank you to everyone that joined us. Partnership, solidarity, appreciation, and duty bearing. Final word, thank you so much, and see you next time on the same channel. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.